Join us for a deep dive into EMR.
Everything you need to know about the method that is revolutionizing the world of trauma.
Welcome back, everybody.
Another deep dive.
Today we're going to be tackling something
Okay.
that I think a lot of people can relate to, and that is cynophobia.
Fear of dogs.
Yeah, fear of dogs.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking about like, oh, I don't really like dogs, or I prefer cats. We're talking about like
Deep-seated,
yeah,
often debilitating fear.
yeah. And to help us unpack this a little bit, we have a fascinating story.
Yes.
And this story centers around Sarah.
Yeah. Sarah's story is incredible.
It really is. And, you know, I think when you hear the word phobia, it's easy to kind of just be like, oh, yeah, like you said, debilitating.
Right.
But to kind of gloss over just how impactful it can be.
It's easy to minimize.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think Sarah's story is really going to help kind of highlight this and make it real for people.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I think a good place to start with this is just to talk about like how this phobia
Manifested for Sarah
Yeah.
because she didn't, you know, grow up afraid of dogs. This happened
Right.
after a particular event.
Well, and that's actually a common misconception about phobias, right?
Yeah.
Some people have kind of like a predisposition
Yes.
to maybe being a little bit more anxious or a little bit more reactive to certain stimuli.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, particularly with cynophobia,
Okay.
it stems from a very specific event,
Right.
usually early on in life.
Okay, so for Sarah, was it like a childhood?
Yeah, she was bit by a dog.
She was bit by a dog.
With you as young, yeah.
And so, I mean, how common is that? Is that like the
Origin story for this particular phobia?
It is. It's one of the most common.
Really?
Yeah, and it makes sense, right?
Right.
Because dogs can be unpredictable.
Yeah.
And if you have that one negative experience early on, it's very easy for that to become
To stick with you.
ingrained. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially in those formative years.
So this happened when she was young, and then how did it kind of grow from there?
Because I imagine, you know, it's one thing to be afraid of the dog that bit you, but then how does it expand out to like all dogs?
That's the nature of a phobia. It's not always logical.
Right.
It's this kind of like
Irrational.
this irrational fear that then gets associated with anything, even remotely related.
So for her, did it start with like all dogs that look like the one that bit her, or was it just like any dog?
It can be different for different people.
Yep.
For her, it was any dog,
Wow.
any size, any breed.
Wow.
Even the sound of a bark
Oh, wow.
could trigger anxiety.
So it's like her nervous system is just like
On high alert.
absolutely like permanently stuck in fight or flight mode.
And that's got to be exhausting.
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly draining.
Yeah.
Both physically and emotionally.
Yeah. So we're talking about like, this is beyond just like, oh, I don't like dogs. This is like,
This is affecting her life.
it controlled her life. It
Yeah.
really did.
And we're going to,
Dive into that a little bit more after the break, but like,
Is something holding you back? Old pains, fears, feeling powerless.
With EMR, a revolutionary method for emotional release through eye movements,
You can release the pain, trauma, anxiety, PTSD directly from the subconscious without talking about what happened.
Go to emrtherapy.com, leave details, and we will get back to you.
can you just give us like one example of how,
this really impacted her.
yeah, so she had this opportunity, this amazing job opportunity.
Okay.
Like dream job, corner office, the whole 9 yards.
Okay.
And she found out that they allowed dogs in the office.
Oh, no.
And not just like as a one-time thing. It was like
Like a dog-friendly?
dog-friendly office.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for her, that was a no-go.
She couldn't.
Couldn't even consider it.
Wow. So she had to turn down her dream job
She did.
because of this fear.
Because of her fear of dogs.
Wow. That's
incredible.
how powerful this phobia can be.
Yeah.
It really is.
And, you know, for a lot of people, they might be listening to this and they might be like,
Oh, just get over it. Or like, it's just a dog. Like,
right. Right.
what would you say to those people?
I think until you've walked a mile in someone's shoes, it's really hard to understand
Yeah.
the grip that a phobia can have on you.
Yeah.
It's not just a matter of willpower.
Right.
It's a real
thing.
It's a real thing.
Yeah. And it's affecting her life in a very real way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a quick break.
Stay with us.
Is something holding you back? Old pains, fears, feeling powerless.
with EMR, a revolutionary method for emotional release through eye movements,
You can release the pain, trauma, anxiety, PTSD directly from the subconscious without talking about what happened.
Go to 𝒘𝒊𝒕𝒉 leave details, and we will get back to you.
So before the break, we were talking about how this fear of dogs was literally like controlling Sarah's life.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, imagine
Yeah.
living with that kind of fear.
Like every day.
Every day.
Yeah, and it's not just about like avoiding dogs on the street. It's like
Right?
it's the constant worry.
Absolutely.
The
what ifs. Yeah, and the impact that has on your relationships, your career, your just overall well-being.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about what she did to overcome it. But first, I'm kind of curious, like, what are some of the things that people typically try
Sure.
when it comes to dealing with phobias?
People try different things. Some people try just like straight up avoidance.
What else have you seen people try?
Well, talk therapy is often a good starting point.
Okay, to kind of like unpack where the fear is coming from.
Exactly. And to develop some coping mechanisms
Right.
for dealing with the anxiety.
And did Sarah try that?
She did. She actually tried a number of different therapies.
Really?
Yeah, she tried talk therapy,
Okay.
CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. But for whatever reason, nothing seemed to stick.
Wow. So she's tried all these different things and she's still
Living with this fear.
living with this fear.
Yeah, and that's got to be disheartening.
Oh, incredibly so. And that's where things start to get really interesting.
Okay.
Because just when she was about to give up hope, she stumbled upon this therapy called EMR.
EMR.
EMR, yeah.
But it is a fascinating therapy
Okay, good.
that's been gaining a lot of traction
Okay.
in recent years. And essentially what it involves is using guided eye movements
Okay.
to help reprocess traumatic memories and phobias.
Okay, so I'm like picturing almost like,
A tennis match
yeah, kind of.
where I'm like following the ball back and forth with my eyes. Is that
It's similar to that.
Okay.
Yeah, so the therapist might have you follow their finger
okay?
or a light
Okay.
as it moves back and forth.
Okay.
And the idea is that these eye movements
Okay.
can actually stimulate
Okay.
different parts of the brain,
Interesting.
the parts that are involved in processing memories and emotions.
Okay, so it's almost like you're kind of like,
Reset.
yeah, you're kind of like hitting the refresh button
Yeah.
on your brain,
Okay.
allowing it to kind of like reprocess these memories in a safer,
Okay.
more manageable way.
So it's not about erasing the memory.
Yeah.
It's about changing how you
Exactly.
react to it.
Exactly.
Okay. And so how does this apply to Sarah?
So for Sarah, she would go to these EMR sessions
Okay.
and the therapist would guide her through these eye movements.
Okay. So she's like revisiting that
Yeah.
childhood trauma
Exactly.
while she's doing that.
While she's doing this. And the amazing thing is
Yeah.
that over time,
Yeah.
she started to notice a difference.
Really? Like what kind of difference are we talking about here?
Well, the intensity of her fear started to lessen.
Wow. So it wasn't like this immediate, like, oh, I'm cured. It's like
It was a gradual process,
Right.
but she started to notice that she could think about dogs
Dog.
without having that same level of panic.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was like the volume had been turned down
Wow.
on her fear response.
And so how long did that take? Like how many sessions are we talking?
It's different for everyone,
Okay.
but for Sarah, it was a matter of weeks
Really?
before she started to see some significant changes.
Wow, that's amazing. And so what happened next? She's no longer controlled by her fear.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And that's like what you were saying earlier. It's like,
It's easy to judge
right.
from the outside, but when you're
Until you've walked in her shoes.
right.
It's hard to understand.
Yeah, and she's living proof that
Like, it is possible.
it is possible to overcome
Yeah.
even deep-seated phobias
So for anybody out there who's listening,
and is maybe struggling with something similar.
well, what would you want them to take away?
I would want them to know that there's hope,
Yeah.
that they don't have to suffer in silence,
Yeah.
that there are effective therapies out there
Yeah.
like EMR
Yeah.
that can help them to reclaim their lives.
And that it's okay to ask for help.
Absolutely. There's no shame in seeking help.
No, not at all.
In fact, it's one of the bravest things you can do.
Well, thank you so much for...
Coming on and sharing your expertise and
It's been a pleasure.
and for helping us.
Understand this a little bit better.
My pleasure.
And for anybody who wants to learn more about...
Cynophobia or EMR.
Yes.
We'll be sure to put some links
Great idea.
in the show notes. So thank you again for listening to another deep dive.
We'll catch you next time.